From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay, the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour nears its final destination. Our scouts finding reasons to celebrate.
For this year, for 2019, 60 pods on a plant. It's some of the best we've seen.
And Minnesota sure has its problems. We'll have a report from the state coming up.
We continue our team coverage as our crews enter the final leg of the tour and continue to crunch the numbers.
Coverage of the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer, our premier sponsor, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, Farmable, and Farm Credit Services of America.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Normally on the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour, by the time we roll through Illinois, we'd be talking about the possibility of bin-busting crops. That's not the case this year. Let's get right to the numbers from day 3 in Illinois. Corn yields fell to 171 bushels per acre compared to last year's ProFarmer estimates. They're down 11%. Soybeans not faring much better at 997 pods per 3x3 square. That's 331 pods fewer, about 25% under last year's estimate. So far, all of the states sampled on the eastern leg of the tour, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, haven't broken more than 1,000 pods per 3x3 square. Maturity, it's been a big problem for both corn and soybeans.
I was disappointed, I'll be honest with you. We saw prevent plant acres, we saw crops that weren't up to standard by any means, well substandard, and that's good black soil over there, very good ground. The producers, typically you don't see any prevent plant acres in that area. You see lush crops. I was trying to explain to some of my crop scouts that are new to crop tour that those producers, they anticipate 200 plus bushel off all those acres, and there's a lot of them that won't get even close to that this year.
Soon enough, the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour will release its ProFarmer estimates for the corn and soybean crops in Iowa. But first, AgDay's Betsy Gibbon takes us through the home stretch of what scouts are seeing on the way to Rochester, Minnesota.
Clinton, scouts in Minnesota had higher hopes for the state, but as you can see, there are some problems in the field. Much of Minnesota, like the rest of the Corn Belt, planted late this spring.
We had planting going on from very end of April all the way through the middle of June.
Nelson says yield is all over the place, but problems in the field are there.
July 20th, we had quite a wind and had a lot of green snap.
And scouts traveling through Martin and Watonwa counties are seeing rust, hail damage, and even green snap. Scouts say they can tell the crop was mudded in due to a wet spring, seeing nitrogen problems too.
Plant health is actually pretty good. It's better than the last two fields, except for the nitrogen deficiency. I am disappointed in the yields here compared to previous years and compared to what we've seen in Nebraska and western Iowa.
Driving by some clean soybean fields and spotting many 4-bean pods. But overall, they say pod counts are not there, at least yet.
The pod counts aren't really that impressive. I mean, we're averaging through 5 stops a little under 900 pods. So it's okay, but it's not great.
Spring problems lingering throughout the summer. Farmers hoping they don't last in the fall. Reporting for AgDay, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Now back to the eastern half of the tour and Farm Journal's Tyne Morgan. Tyne, after those numbers in Illinois, scouts were hoping for better news in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota on the last leg of the tour.
Yeah, Clinton, and as scouts hit the road for the 4th day of the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour, that's exactly what they saw. They did see better crops, but better compared to what they've seen on the first half of Crop Tour this year.
30-inch rows.
In northern Johnston County, Iowa,
16 plants.
The soybeans look good.
It's up to my waist. That's some of the best beans we've seen.
Good compared to a disappointing start to Crop Tour.
I mean, they look okay.
Pete Meyer isn't overly impressed with what these plants may produce.
Just looking at it, I can't say I'm going to get 100 pods out of these plants.
A loaded soybean plant,
which is, sometimes we see that on 30-inch rows,
is typical in this part of Iowa, and this year that type of pod count just isn't there.
53, 56, 59, 60. That's for this year, for 2019, 60 pods on a plant. That's some of the best we've seen.
Average for Iowa in a year that was anything but average.
But then again, when you compare what we've seen in Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, it's pretty darn good.
Julie Edmonds is in Sperry, Iowa, and she says her biggest concern right now is weather this fall.
We need all the time we can get before a frost hits.
8.5.
That's sprouting worries about shallow kernels and test weights. Frost is also a fear for Meyer, a variable that makes it hard to peg yield today.
You give me a frost date, I can give you a yield. At this point, it's anybody's guess, and certainly an early frost date or even an on-schedule frost date will certainly have a dramatic impact on corn yields heading east into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio.
More worries out east as some of Iowa's most fruitful fields may bear mediocre results.
It's a little bit above average.
Well, and Clint, as you can see, the corn behind me, it looks really good. But as a Pioneer agronomist told us Wednesday night, he said a normal frost, crops should be okay in eastern Iowa. But an early frost, and we're in trouble. Reporting from Iowa on the ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour, I'm Tyne Morgan for AgDay.
And we've been hearing from a lot of people on the tour about this, the EPA's decision to grant those 31 small refinery waivers, the decision sparking anger among ethanol producers. And now the president may reverse course on it. Reuters reporting President Trump would meet with Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue and EPA Administrator Andrew Wheeler. Reuters saying the president will be presented several options, including reversing some of the waivers granted to oil refineries. Now, while on tour, we asked Ted Seifert of Zaner Ag Hedge Group about the possibility.
Even the conversation, I think, is a good thing for the ethanol industry, but we need to see action. So, okay, fine, reverse them. I think it does make us look silly, but reverse them. But the question is really going to be, what happens after that? Are they going to come back 2 months later and grant another 37 SREs or something like that? Or does this stop the trend? Is this been the wake-up call that's been needed to say, okay, we realize there's a problem here. We have to take another look at granting all these SREs that we've been granting and move away from the waivers because, you know, destroying the RFS is destroying the ethanol industry.
Reuters saying another idea that might be presented to the president involves reallocating the volumes waived under the exemptions. And we will have a complete wrap on what our experts in the field saw during the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour, along with the final numbers. That's on Monday's edition of AgDay. Many producers counting on a second round of trade aid to help them this year, and we're hearing that the first installment of payments are underway. Our Washington correspondent Jim Wiesmeyer reporting that the start of the second round of Market Facilitation Program payments will begin yet this month. But USDA's FSA had to deal with some software glitches regarding some components of the program, and that will mean some producers won't get their payouts until September. Now the payments, they total about $16 billion. We've been treated to some spectacular sights in the sky along the way in Crop Tour, as meteorologist Cindy Clausen shows us in today's Crop Comments.
Well, Clinton, it's nice to be out on the crop tour when you see beautiful scenes like this. Now, this was taken on the tour near Bloomington, Illinois. A spectacular sunrise greeted those scouts before heading out into those soybean rows. Let's take a look at the wind speed forecast, and the area to really watch today is going to be right in the nation's midsection, the northern plains, central plains, and then back into the southwestern part of the United States and even into the southern plains as well. Heading into the overnight hours, you can see things really, of course, die off quite a bit. And then on Saturday, the main focus for those winds is going to be, for the most part, into the upper Midwest. I'll have your national forecast coming up.
All right, coming up, scouts on the tour have been getting an eyeful when it comes to soybeans. What will it take to turn things around? And later, one crop is seeing big numbers this year, and it doesn't grow in the ground. That's coming up in the country.
Ag Day, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever. Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
USDA reported wheat sales from last week were up 29% from the previous week, while sales of corn were up 31%. That may have helped spur the market a bit on Thursday. Here's an update from the CME.
We have seen the grains try to stage a little bit of a rally here in today's session, which is very encouraging. We saw a little bit of follow through over the past couple of days, and we're looking at potentially posting higher lows for that corn market reversing potentially the trend of lower lows and lower highs over the past couple months. We always say the bottom is a process, not necessarily a point, so perhaps we're starting that process. If we're able to hold 363 3/4 to 365, I think that'll confirm it. What the bulls really want to see is a conviction close out above 381. If they can achieve this on a consecutive closing basis, I think that opens the door for a potential run at that gap from the USDA report. It comes in near 392 3/4. Now, as far as the soybeans are concerned, a little bit less optimistic. We saw a nice pop in the overnight and early morning session, but failed to really maintain that momentum, and we've faded back off of that. 854.5 to 860 is the must-hold support pocket for the bull camp. A break and close below there, and I tell you what, there's really not a whole lot of technical support until you get down towards contract lows of 815. This has been Oliver Soap with Blue Line Futures from the floor of the CME.
Pete Meyer with S&P Global Platts out here on the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour. Let's talk about the soybeans. Production-wise, planted acres are down. Does production matter given what's going on in the hog herd around the world?
That's a very good question. There's no question in my mind from what I've seen so far. Soybean production is going to be a shocker. Last night we saw it with the pod counts. Pod counts are low. This crop was predominantly planted after the summer solstice on June 21st. As you know, Clinton, these soybeans are so sunlight dependent. We've actually seen some plants already starting to shut down. So the production numbers are going to be low. The acreage number is obviously going to be low. And then we have to see. I think a lot of it really depends on can Brazil run out before the end of the year. We think they can run out. Okay. But the problem there is that the U.S. is going to be a secondary supplier. Right, so they're going to go to Brazil first with these tariffs in place by the Trump administration. So we have to kind of look at that. I think there will be some demand for U.S. beans from the Chinese, and maybe that bolsters the price a little bit because the soybean crop is definitely one that's just not here this year.
Yeah. How hard is it, even if yields are down, even if our harvested acres are down, how hard is it to move that bean price this year, giving all the external factors?
The biggest external factor, while you and I have talked about the hog herd throughout the world, ASF, till they have that totally under control, the biggest factor actually is how big the Brazilian crop is going to be. You know, a factor that we look at as well is what the Brazilian real is worth, how aggressive those guys are going to be. As you've seen, Macri in Argentina lost the preliminary election. Doesn't look like he's going to be reelected president. What does that mean to Argentinian export tariffs? Boy, there's so many pieces that have to evolve their way. So does it matter? Yes, I think it'll matter on the global balance sheet, which will bolster price a little bit. But to get that big oomph, let's say back to $10 or something like that, it's going to need a failure in Brazil or South America or some dramatic changes government-wise in South America to make that happen.
All right, will be something to watch. Appreciate it, Pete. Thanks so much. We'll be back with more Ag Day and a check of weather coming up.
For more information on S&P Global Platts agricultural research and analysis, call 646-478-6465. Farm Journal ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour drone coverage brought to you by AeroVironment. Maximize every acre with the Quantix and AV DSS drone and data analytics ecosystem. Proceed with certainty.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Well, let's take a look at our maps because we're going to be seeing some more rain, showers, and thunderstorms in parts of the nation's midsection and into the east. You can see there's a cold frontal boundary there that's all the way from sort of the mid-Atlantic states all the way back into sort of the central and southern plains and up into parts of the northern high plains as well. That's going to be the focus for some showers and thunderstorms as we head through the day. We'll see some scattered showers and thunderstorms popping up with that heat and humidity in the southeast as well. High pressure in the southwest, keeping things mainly dry there. And we'll watch the northern high plains. We have a secondary front there, but high pressure controlling the Great Lakes, and you can see how most areas are going to be dry for a couple of days in much of the Corn Belt. The rain really focusing on the southeastern part of the country, and then with that low as you get into the central and into the northern plains. As we head into your Friday night into Saturday morning, that high moves off to the east, so clear skies in a lot of the Great Lakes and into the northeast, while we still see some scattered showers and thunderstorms in the southern plains. Looking into your Saturday, we're going to see more scattered showers and thunderstorms, especially along that front in the southeast and getting back up into the plains. Now, as far as precipitation, the past 24 hours really has been kind of along that front that's been in the nation's midsection and over into the eastern parts of the country. And that's where we'll see the rain really focusing over the next 24 hours as well. And then as you get up into the northern plains, up into Montana, and even into southwestern Canada as well. Temperature-wise, it's much cooler. We have that cooler and more comfortable air in a lot of the northern part of the country, but the south is still dealing with the heat, and a lot of areas we're seeing the humidity as well. 80s and 90s across most of the southern tier of the United States. Now, as we look into the overnight hours, you can see those cooler 50s in the Great Lakes and into the northeast, still some 60s and 70s in most of the southern part of the country. And then tomorrow, everybody cools down a little bit as that cooler air moves a little bit further to the south. And we still see some 80s and 90s as you get down into the southern United States, but it shouldn't be quite as hot tomorrow. Taking a quick check at that jet stream. Now, we do have a ridge in the nation's midsection that moves on off to the east. And watch as some cooler air starts to come back in then. As we get into the beginning of next week, we could see some stormy weather in parts of the Great Lakes and into the northeast as that trough moves across the country, and that can continue as we get into the latter part of the week as well. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Winchester, Oregon, sunny and warmer today with a high of 84 degrees. Stanley, North Dakota, scattered showers and thunderstorms, high of 76 degrees. And Robbins, North Dakota, a good chance for storms, high of 90.
Coming up, the latest on trade negotiations with China, what Beijing says U.S. officials need to do, and what President Trump had to say. Next.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
We're continuing to update you on the situation with China. The country's appealing to Washington to meet each other halfway and settle the trade war. A Ministry of Commerce spokesman warned new U.S. tariffs would result in the escalation of trade frictions. The Trump administration has postponed some tariff hikes previously planned for September 1st on Chinese imports, but others are still scheduled to go ahead. The president talking about China and the trade war at the White House this week.
We are winning against China. They've lost 2.5 million jobs in a very short period of time. They want to make a deal. It's got to be a deal that's good for the United States. When they want to make a deal, probably we will make a deal. But if I didn't do that, and I'm not doing it, somebody said it's Trump's trade war. This isn't my trade war. This is a trade war that should have taken place a long time ago by a lot of other presidents.
Negotiations are deadlocked over how to enforce a possible trade deal. Beijing says punitive tariffs imposed by Trump on Chinese products must be lifted as soon as an agreement takes effect. Now, Washington wants to keep some on to ensure Beijing carries out on any promises it makes. Talks last month in Shanghai ended with no sign of progress. More talks are scheduled in Washington next month. About 6 in 10 Americans disapprove of President Trump's overall job performance. That's according to a new poll released Thursday by the Associated Press NORC Center for Public Affairs Research. According to that poll, 36% of Americans approve of the way the president is handling his job. 62% disapprove, but the president remains overwhelmingly popular within his own party. Nearly 8-10 Republicans approve of his overall job performance, while 20% disapprove.
So for those Republicans, they will live or die based on how their president does in November. They have firmly hitched their wagons to him, and if President Trump's numbers don't improve before Election Day, the GOP will have a very bad November 2020.
Significantly more Americans approve of the president's handling of the economy, although even on that issue, he remains slightly underwater. 46% approve, 51% disapprove of his performance. Love to go fishing in your downtime? You may want to put your boat in the water in California, where a certain kind of fish are making a big comeback. A severe drought didn't just affect California's crops in the past, it affected the sea population, but at least one fish making a big comeback. And if you love to fish, you're going to love this news. After years of weak harvests, the Chinook salmon are booming. In fact, California fishermen reporting one of the best salmon fishing season in years right now. It's all thanks to heavy rains and snow that ended the state's historic drought. It's a sharp reversal for Chinook salmon, also known as king salmon. It's an iconic species that helps sustain many Pacific Coast fishing communities.
It still feels good to catch a fish. It doesn't matter how old you are or how many times you've done it or how big the fish is. If you have a fish on the end of a string, it feels good every time. You know, it's still exciting. And it also feels good to know that our resource is healthy.
Commercial salmon catches have so far surpassed official preseason forecasts by about 50%. That's according to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Coverage of the 2019 ProFarmer Midwest Crop Tour is brought to you by Pioneer, our premier sponsor, with support from IBM, RCIS, RAM, AeroVironment, Titan Tires, Farmable, and Farm Credit Services of America.